We welcome you to Economic Forum, a program where we discuss various issues affecting our economy in Zimbabwe. These are various. They can be in the field of industry, manufacturing, tourism, education, and sport. We bring experts here to discuss how they contribute to economic development in Zimbabwe. My name is John Masuku. The media plays a very important role in the development of the country if properly handled. And this is why today we have Professor Ruby Magosvongwe, who is the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Media Commission. We are going to be talking all things media, your role in preparing for the elections, because if the country does not get a positive image, that affects the business. The role of women, how are they portrayed, particularly in advertisements and in articles where people are trying to raise money. All that, we're going to be bombarding that with to you, Professor Magosvongwe, as well as the safety of journalists and the role of the corporates in supporting media development. With those, we welcome you to Economic Forum.
Thank you, Mr. Masuku, for inviting me to this very, honorable, platform that informs the nation and the broader, viewers of the Zimbabwe, television.
How are you, as the Zimbabwe Media Commission, preparing for the election so that it is well covered and it dispels all those negative perceptions from our country and so forth? I'm sure there's something that you are planning so that there's good coverage without misinformation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Masuku, for that critical question, and which is so insightful and fortunate in our case as Zimbabwe Media Commission, because you know what, it's as if this had been pre-planned. You are asking me about that at a time or a point that we have launched the Elections Reporting and Peace Journalism Manual. Through this Elections Reporting and Peace Journalism Manual, what we have done is to prepare the journalists and other media practitioners on the skills gaps and competencies that need to be addressed, and also media having that privilege as the fourth estate to educate the electorate about the electoral process. It's not an event. Unfortunately, people have been focusing just on the elections day, but we are looking at the electoral process itself.
While you do that in Zimbabwe, news about the elections, what's taking place and so forth, also filters, around the world through international media. How, as the Commission, do you ensure that such coverage is balanced for the image of Zimbabwe? Because that is where those who want to come and invest in Zimbabwe will want to watch, will want to read, to see whether Zimbabwe's governance processes are in order.
The electoral cycle is a process, it's not an event. We are moving from reports about the 2018 harmonized elections. Reports were made, and soon afterwards we had the Mohlante Commission. Not only the Mohlante Commission, but other developments. We are looking at the repeal of IPA by the Second Republic, for instance. And in place of IPA, the repeal of IPA, we now have the Zimbabwe Media Commission Act. As per the Constitution, we now have the Freedom of Information Act, again as a result of this repeal. And at the moment, we are in the process of working and looking towards a media practitioners bill so that everyone works within a framework that makes us accountable, transparent, and professional, taking responsibility for the environment that we are creating in the Zimbabwean space, not for the international community, Mr. Masuku, but first and primarily for the Zimbabwean citizenry.
As the Commission, you are also interested and actually mandated to have a good media through different regulations. And in the past, really, you were the most feared, commission. How have those perceptions disappeared so that there is confidence when you say, yes, by law, through the Constitution, we are a regulator, and therefore your work has to be respected, not feared? How have you done that?
The Constitution provides the framework within which the Zimbabwe Media Commission has to operate. If we go to section 248, 249, it's very clear, what the role and responsibility of the Zimbabwe Media Commission ought to be. Freedom of the media, freedom of expression. But if you go to sections 60 and 62, there are limitations concerning name calling, hate speech, and even incitement of violence. So our constitution is very clear. And the Zimbabwe Media Commission encourages our stakeholders, our players, to be professional. How do they become professional? They have to be accountable within the framework that has been provided. Accountable through the Constitution, accountable through the Zimbabwe Media Commission Act, accountable through the Freedom of Information Act. Mm-hmm. The onus now is on the players, the stakeholders, to familiarize themselves with the contents of this act, familiarize themselves with the contents of the Constitution itself, so that at the end of the day, there is no misconceptions, there are no misconceptions concerning the role of the Zimbabwe Media Commission.
That's Professor Ruby Magosvongwe, who is the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Media Commission. We are discussing the role of the media in the election, since we are having an election in Zimbabwe very soon. Discussing the role of the election, the safety of journalists, how women are portrayed, and also how the business sector is supporting media development. So join us in the second segment of Economic Forum. We are now in the second segment of Economic Forum, where today we are discussing the media, its role in elections, as we are going to be having an election in Zimbabwe in the next few months. And we've invited the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Media Commission, Professor Ruby Magosvongwe. Professor, you were talking about the Constitution and how you work within it in order to regulate the media. But nowadays, most people, if not all, are journalists, as they put it, because they can disseminate information. And some of it can actually be very dangerous, especially on social media. How do you come into that yourselves?
They are not journalists. They may be content disseminators or content distributors, because of the access that they have to this, information that yourself and myself may not have access to. But at the end of the day, it is the responsibility now of our journalists, of our media stakeholders, to investigate the facts, so that at the end of the day, the citizenry out there will not depend on social media. That has become very disruptive, at times creating very toxic, circumstances and conditions. And that on its own is what, in the end, will actually retain the confidence that our readership and viewers out there have in mainstream media.
The other thing is the safety of journalists and the sources. In many countries around the world, we read about journalists who are killed while they are on their line of duty, as well as sources who give out information. And again, when we go back to what we said earlier on, that the business environment then becomes a bit hazy, the investors don't want to come into such a country. And as the Commission, these are some of the things that you want to avoid in our operations in Zimbabwe, that there is confidence in our journalism and the sources that we use.
The image that we portray through the narratives that we share, not only through social media, but even through mainstream media, do matter a great deal. Because at the end of the day, they're a reflection of what the Zimbabwean space is and what the Zimbabwean people actually aspire to achieve and they aspire to be. As the Zimbabwe Media Commission, we don't work in isolation, as an ivory tower far removed from the practitioners out there. We work in concert, we work in collaboration, we work together with other stakeholders. That's number one. Number two, engagement, conversations like we are having now go a long way in ensuring and entrenching a culture of conversations. Even where we differ, we may have different opinions, but it doesn't make us enemies. We have different perceptions, we have different opinions, but at the end of the day, through engagements, through conversations, through dialogue, we can always come to a point where we agree that the thrust and the major objective, the goal, is to secure the interests of Zimbabwe. And media has to contribute towards the GDP. We have now licenses being issued, TV licenses, for instance, giving diversity and choice for the viewership of our country. And in that manner, we are actually not just growing access to information, but also growing the industry. So many people also get employed. Content creators get an opportunity to come on board and contribute. And that way, through these diversified skills, we are now building an industry that is accountable and responsible for the viewership of Zimbabwe.
While you are there, you have licensed quite a number of newspapers, or media house, should I say. But quite a number of them, it is evident that they are struggling, to sustain themselves. In fact, in some cases, you have some of them delaying their opening. What are you doing as the Commission to improve media sustainability, or even making it a topic that has to be discussed with the corporate sector to make sure that our media is not that fledgling?
ZMC alone cannot go it solo. ZMC is not a lone player to make media as an industry sustainable in Zimbabwe. Corporate sector has to come in. How do they come in? Of course, we have them contributing through advertisements and so on. But we would like to have a situation whereby if we are going to have some indaba, for instance, with the corporate sector coming on board, we bring together all stakeholders and discuss such a very critical topic like the elections itself, that are in the offing. Everybody has a role to play. Corporate sector, general citizenry. So in addition to that, ZMC is going to go out there in all the 10 provinces, educating and training our stakeholders on this toolkit that we have developed.
Yes.
So that at least we can have a peaceful and conducive electoral environment.
That's Professor Ruby Magosvongwe, who is the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Media Commission, and we are discussing all matters to do with media, talking about media sustainability, as well as how the Commission is guided by the Constitution, and also how the business community can actually support the media without capturing it. So join us in the third and final segment of Economic Forum. We are now in the third and final segment of Economic Forum, where today our guest is Professor Ruby Magosvongwe, who is the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Media Commission. In this segment, let's start off by what you were already discussing in the last one to do with sustainability and the role of the corporate sector. A research organization, the Media and Journalism Research Overseas, just produced a report which says the corporate sector generally all over the world is not supporting as it should the media in terms of long-term support, never mind the awards that are given and the ones of scholarships. How is it here in Zimbabwe? Are we getting that support from the corporate sector?
I would want to zero in on the support of the corporate sector. It's not a choice. Zimbabweans has to put their money where their mouths are fed. For us to have a peaceful and conducive environment, the corporate sector has to be available. They have to rope themselves in. It's not about wooing or courting them. It is a corporate social responsibility that our corporate sector takes responsibility by offering scholarships to tertiary institutions, media training institutions, so that at the end of the day...
And research.
So that
even into business.
Exactly. So that at the end of the day, they are party to the whole spectrum of the media industry. But let me also hasten to say that the Zimbabwe Media Commission is no benefactor of any single media house. It has an overall regulatory and oversight authority. So the whole media industry in Zimbabwe is under the umbrella of the Zimbabwe Media Commission, bring us back to the whole idea that everyone has a role to play. The Zimbabwe Media Commission, as the regulator, yes, comes in, but it's the players out there who are going to make alive the aspirations that we have in the constitutions, the aspirations that we have through the different regulations and the regulatory acts that we have to enable the media industry itself to function well and in a fair manner. Yes.
The month of March is commemorated the world over as International Women's Month, and the 8th of March is commemorated as International Women's Day. Where are the women in the media? Tell us about how you are capacitating them to be journalists. Where are they as social and political commentators, and how are they still being portrayed in the media, in advertisements and so forth?
I am saddened by the fact that as the Zimbabwean media training institutions, hardly do we have women's voices actually being recognized and disseminated. Why am I saying so? Women as sources of news are hardly visible, are hardly audible.
They've been invited and are not available, but in other programs that are not controversial, you find them there. Why is that so?
I'm glad you have pointed where the problem is the controversy. You are saying in other programs that are not controversial. Media is a controversial field, and there is need for verification of information. Look at how certain female personalities, whom I'm not going to mention by name, have been attacked through Twitter, through Facebook, social media. That on its own becomes inhibitive. That's number one. Number two, women generally have a natural characteristic of nurturing and protecting their very own. I wouldn't be happy to be before you, on this economic forum, discussing and debating on issues that may actually endanger my children at home. That partly explains why women are hardly visible in this particular case. Let me also quickly, point out that the males who are in charge of the editorial boards, the editing, editorship, within the media houses, have not been very supportive of the female, media practitioners. Why am I saying so? As the editors, they sift what needs to go through and be disseminated.
We'll stop there on that one so that we give you the opportunity of talking about how the women have risen like you up the ladder. Just an overview, whether with so many women CEOs in the media, general managers and so forth, as we have you as the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Media Commission.
It is actually an honor, Mr. Masuku, that I'm the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Media Commission. Women are just a drop, in the ocean in the media sector. I want to quickly give you an overview. Adelaide Kunguru, CEO of ZBC. And then another woman, we have Victoria Rujidzo, editor Sunday Mail. We have Wendy Nyakurerwa, editor Manika Post. And those are the female voices through the top 10 media houses that I've used for my research. And then Mashingomira, that's where we have only Elizabeth Mashir. How many women do we have out of all these, media players? So we are saying and encouraging our media houses, media owners, stakeholders, that the woman's voice matters. The children's voices also do matter, because that's partly the wholesome and holistic narrative that we are looking for. When we use women as sources of news, there is another dimension that is brought, into the limelight that we often normally don't get to hear.
Yes. Are they taking up positions in academic institutions like training as media practitioners or even lecturing?
Unfortunately, because of the background that we have had, previously, women being, silenced, in terms of being accorded and afforded opportunities to continue with their studies, there are few women who can be identified by virtue of this earlier, selective process that sidelined them. But let me hasten to say that we've had, people like Commissioner Susan Makore, but how many Susan Makores do we have?
That's Professor Ruby Magosvongwe, who is the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Media Commission. She was our guest today. We're talking about various issues affecting women, including election reporting, the role of media in the forthcoming elections, talking about the safety of journalists and sources, and how business can contribute to media development, and many other issues. So what remains is for me to thank you very much, Professor Ruby Magosvongwe, the chairperson of ZMC, as well as the production team. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can do so on the numbers that are showing on your screen or on the social media platforms that we're also displaying. If you've missed some of the programs, you can watch them on our YouTube channel, which is Economic Forum Zimbabwe. So on behalf of Professor Magosvongwe and the production crew, this is John Masugu wishing you happy viewing.